definitely do also have kind of, I think, voter apathy and fatigue for some voters in Greater Manchester. This could be their third time hitting the polls since February. And then you've also got the unfortunate timing. It's the middle of the summer holidays, people are away, students might have travelled back home.
Labour's Bev Craig is the new mayor of Greater Manchester. She won a convincing victory over Reform's Cyan Astley after second preference ballots were counted, taking some 2/3 of the vote. But she failed to replicate the achievement of her predecessor in the post, Andy Burnham, by winning more than 50% of first preference votes. And turnout was a meagre 25%. Pretty disappointing result also for the Green Party, who finished third, and the Conservatives, who ended up with fewer votes than Rupert Lowe's Restore Britain party. Lucy McLaughlin is a journalist at the Mill in Manchester and joins us now. Lucy, good morning.
Good morning, thanks for having me up.
It's great to have you. So Bev Craig's win, this is good news for the Labour Party. There are inevitably comparisons with her predecessor. How does she, her policies, her strategy compare with that of Andy Burnham?
She is obviously the continuity candidate, if you were to see it like that, because she has been a very close ally of Burnham, having been Manchester City Council leader now for 5 years. Obviously has worked very closely with him on many important decisions across Greater Manchester. I would say that we could look at her manifesto and understand that we're going to get much of the same, in that she's focusing on building housing. That's a key pledge of hers. Tackling homelessness is another key pledge. She's very excited about some of the new powers that are going to be handed to her as part of Burnham's devolution agenda. Although what we have heard from business sources is that she's likely perhaps a bit less reactive and a bit more stable to them than Burnham, slightly less likely to fire off at the hip as her predecessor.
OK. And how will she be feeling about the fact that she didn't quite win, just shy of 50% of the vote? Because, of course, Andy Burnham, in the last time he was elected as Greater Manchester Mayor, swept that no problem.
Yeah, you're right. We've had supplementary voting in the past in our first two elections, and Burnham has always gotten over 60% of the vote share. So a lot more than Bev Craig has. I would say that is, while it's already being kind of leveraged as a criticism from the Greens, Labour will be so pleased to have enjoyed this win if you were to consider the local election results in May, where they suffered unprecedented historic losses across the board, both from the Greens in central Manchester and Reform in all of the outer boroughs. So what we've kind of heard from Labour sources, and it seemed Bev Craig herself last night, was that they are just so pleased to have cemented their dominance as Metro mayors of the city region.
Yeah, how did it go for Reform?
Reform came in second. They will likely be disappointed with that, because if, again, you were to take the local election results in May, what you would have presumed was that Reform were going to be the front runner, and they enjoyed kind of most of the vote shares because you had the Green and Labour split down the middle. Now, having said that, they were always not going to benefit from this new voting system, supplementary voting, and they are actually well up from their 2024 elections, and they will have seen this as an important opportunity to kind of consolidate their voter base and potentially flip some councils when we go to the elections again for the locals next year.
Yeah, turnout was really low. The lowest since the position was created in 2017, 25%. Why do you think that was? Did people think, oh, this is sort of a shoe-in, or I'm not that invested in it?
Yeah, it was a meagre turnout. That was discussed a lot at the count. I think there are a few reasons for that. I would say one, when this vacancy occurred, there are laws in place that means it needs to be filled within 35 working days. Now, the Greater Manchester electorate is over 2 million people, and that's the size of some small European countries. For them, this would be their general election. So it's been a very difficult task to try and, in little over a month, a complex operational campaign to make sure people understand that they've got a vote. You definitely do also have kind of, I think, voter apathy and fatigue for some voters in Greater Manchester. This could be their third time hitting the polls since February. And then you've also got the unfortunate timing. It's the middle of the summer holidays, people are away, students might have travelled back home.
Yeah, I know, you just think it's not that much, doesn't inspire that much confidence, does it, when only a quarter of the electorate did decide to vote. What do we think she's going to do as Greater Manchester Mayor? We heard yesterday about the plans from Annie Burnham and Louise Haigh to give mayors greater autonomy, the opportunity to grow their own budgets because they'll be able to take some percentage. We're not exactly sure yet on the numbers. I think we'll get that in the autumn budget, but they'll get some portion of the income tax that's raised in their area. What are her plans?
Yeah, we know that she is really looking forward to those new powers because she loses a bit of hard power actually going from kind of council leader to Metro Mayor. She wants to use some of those new powers from that devolution agenda to look at tackling skills shortages and unemployment in Greater Manchester. In terms of more broadly, she is wary of overpromising. She's a very measured kind of new Metro Mayor, and this is only an 18-month term. She's just finishing Burnham's tenure. However, she has said that there would be a really big focus on housing, affordable housing. That's been a big theme of a lot of candidates' manifestos. We know that she is really interested in tackling homelessness and kind of driving economic growth, similar to the kind of models that Burnham has used in the past.
Yeah, well, he was talking, homelessness was a big campaign that he sought to eradicate while he was Mayor of Greater Manchester. Lucy, thank you for the context. It's been really valuable. Lucy McLaughlin, journalist at The Mill in Manchester. Should we talk about that? Bev Craig wins. She didn't quite get enough votes to secure a majority with the first preference votes, did she? Tell us how it played out.
Well, it's a slightly different system to the last time round, but she did win overall by 66% of the vote, and that is more than what Andy Burnham won by last time. So that's a positive result. Now, you could say that and quibble about the turnout, and there is a dramatic drop in the turnout here. It's 25% turnout in this election. It was 34% last time, but still a win for Labour and a dramatic win, 2-1 basically to Reform.
Yeah, you wonder why the turnout is quite so low. We'll be checking into Manchester in about half an hour's time to get sort of more of the detail of that. What's been really interesting today is John Healey's given this exclusive interview with The Times. And Ali, the first thing to note is that remember that very dramatic moment when John Healey resigned, and that really was the kind of the moment where Keir Starmer's authority completely crumbled, when you've got your Defence Secretary basically saying your plan for defence spending doesn't keep the country safe. How orchestrated was that with Andy Burnham, do we think?
Well, we don't think it was orchestrated. In fact, we do think that John Healey in that instance resigned on a matter of principle on the question of defence, and like many other defence secretaries before him, felt that not enough was being done. Now, almost the awkward thing about this is that he's got to find the same money that he was complaining about. And that, I suppose, is one of the challenges. Now, we do know that he actually spoke to Andy Burnham about defence before he became Prime Minister. So we do know they had the conversation about funding defence in that time.
They did. That's also slightly uncomfortable now, though, isn't it? Because for John Healey now, when asked, the big question was, are we going to spend 3% of GDP by 2030? 2030 is important because that's when the other NATO countries have said they expect or predict that there could be a Russian attack on a NATO country. John Healey resigned over that as a matter of principle, but is not committing to it himself now. He's the Chancellor, the one making the decisions.
Yeah, he's gone with the traditional approach that politicians sometimes take of saying, we'll set out a path to 2030. So, okay, 2030 is 4 years ago. So the next year's spending review are going to set out a path within those 3 years to hit that essential 3% marker. And then you've also said in that same sentence that you're going to hit 3.5%, which is the NATO target of 2035. So clearly you've got all these targets, but you're in some way throwing a lot of them into the long grass. And unless he can find the funding, and we're looking at around £13 billion for the lower end of that target, the 3%, and around £25 billion for the extra 0.5%. So he's got a significant amount of money to find over the next few years.
But John Healey is saying in this interview to The Times that if the Prime Minister wants to do loads of things and there isn't money for it, he'll say that's not possible.
Precisely, and in this interview, he's kind of given a sense of what kind of chancellor he's going to be. He says we need strong fiscal discipline. Andy Burnham and I start from the point where fiscal credibility is the basis of our economic stability. That is fundamental to me and my first priority as Chancellor. We've written to the Cabinet to say if we're serious about new priorities as a second stage Labour government, we have to be serious, and we have to think about it seriously. Reprioritisation of their plans and their budgets. Ideally, you're going to have to make cuts if you want to fund anything new.
That relationship between John Healey and Andy Burnham's clearly going to be critical. Right now, I think Andy Burnham will probably be waking up with a smile on his face. If we look at where the Labour Party are in the polls, they are matching that and exceeding the popularity of Reform UK.
Well, yeah, so this is the first time actually that it's happened since March 2025. That is months and months and almost well over a year ago, actually, 18 months ago that last happened. And if you look at the sort of a variety of polls, in some of them he's 4 points ahead, some of them he's 5 points ahead. In one of them he's drawing, but his personal rating is +8, which is unheard of for a new prime minister in recent times. Most of them come in unpopular and leave very unpopular. So for him to have actually increased his personal rating since coming into office is unheard of.
Yeah, and we should also look at some of his other appointments. I had not heard of him before. Neil Armin Smith has been appointed a top economic advisor. This is a sort of former pop star.
Yes, now I'm sure you're a big fan of Clean Bandit, Rosie. I'm sure you listen to it all the time. I do. It's a great band. But Neil Amin Smith was one of the frontmen of that band, and he has now, in his background, actually, his background was a Master's of Philosophy of Economics. So he's got a very good economics background, and he did work for the Treasury in some capacity since 2019. Now, Rachel Reeves actually took him into the team, and he worked with Rachel Reeves since 2024. Now, what's interesting here is that he's been kept on by Team Burnham as a senior advisor to the Chancellor. And there is this incredible quote that always goes around when people talk about him, and it was given to Politico. He's unusually gorgeous and quite stylish. He's a bit of a pop star, but he doesn't rub it in my face. And that was given to Politico a few years ago.
Unusually gorgeous. Wow, it's sort of a compliment, sort of not. It is interesting, isn't it, when prime ministers decide to bring. It sounds like he hasn't been an outsider for, well, he's been within the team for a few years, but people who've got a very different experience of how the world works from a very different field or industry, and says, come along, I want you at the table.
Well, yeah, precisely. And this is the weird thing, because we were expecting some big names to be Andy Burnham's economic advisors. We're yet to see whether those actually come out. Andy Haldane, for example, who was the former chief economist of Bank of England, being one of them. So we haven't actually heard about whether he's going to be an official advisor to him or in what capacity. But this is interesting in the sense that you've got someone who's clearly come from a different world, but has a clear economics background, a clear thinking background, and he worked for the IFS, the Treasury, Rachel Reeves, and now here. So he has got this economics background, and he is an interesting appointment in itself.
Great. Ali, thank you very much for the update.